In the module Standard Linear Equations, they're checking that you fully understand this whole concept of y equals mx plus c. Now, when you have an equation that's in this form, it's really easy to graph because the m, which just stands for whatever number is the coefficient of x, the number in front of x, that signifies the gradient of the line. And whatever is tacked onto the end, plus or minus something, and c is just a number, that's the y-intercept. So they have already gathered that you understand that the gradient is rise over run, and you can find that if you've got 2 points by always subtracting the y's and subtracting the x's. That's a story for another time. And you should understand that to be ready for this concept. But basically in this module, what we need to know is that if we know the gradient, let's say it's 3, and we know the y-intercept, let's say it's 1, then we can easily write up the equation of the line in this form, y equals, well, we find the gradient, stick that in front of the x, and then we write down the y-intercept. It's positive 1, so we write plus 1. And if you then come to graph that line, the thing you start with is the y-intercept, find 1, and then you can build the gradient. So a gradient of 3 is a steep gradient. We said that gradient is rise over run. So a gradient of 3 will have 3 units tall for every 1 unit across. So if you're starting here and you're using grid paper, just to go across 1 unit and then go up 3, and you'll find that this point up here, which will now be the point 1, 4, will be on your line. So now you only need 2 points on your line to be able to slap your ruler on that and draw it up. And you've graphed the line really simply and easily. Now, you should be able to do this with any line. Let's have another go. Let's say the gradient is minus 2 and the y-intercept is, let's go negative this time, minus 3. The equation of the line will be y equals minus 2x, because minus 2 is the gradient, and then the y-intercept's minus 3, so we put in minus 3. And then when we go to graph it, same strategy again, start with the y-intercept. Again, if you have graph paper, this is much easier. And then build a gradient of minus 2. Now, what does a gradient of minus 2 look like? Well, negative gradients always go this way. You can tell that by reading the graph from left to right. And if as you read from left to right, if you're going down a hill, then it's a negative gradient. That's an easy way to remember it. Now, a gradient of minus 2 means that we have 2 units this way for every 1 this way. I haven't built that very well. That looks a bit better. It's quite a steep line going that way. So it's going to come up this way. And to build it, just go across 1 and up 2. And we know it will go through this point here, minus 1, and away you go. You've got 2 points. That's enough to draw your line. Now in this module, they're checking if you can find the equation of the line if you know the gradient of the y-intercept, and whether you can graph it. But you should be able to find any of these things, as long as you have the gradient, the equation or the graph, you should be able to figure out the other stuff. So let's say we're given a graph, and we can see that the y-intercept is minus 1, and we can see that the gradient, it might be cutting through here at 1. To find the gradient, just draw yourself a little triangle. We can see it's a positive gradient, because as we read from left to right, we're going up the hill. And there's 1 unit here and 1 unit here as we draw our triangle. If it helps you, draw the triangle. We have rise over run, rise of 1, run of 1, and that's the same whether you draw your triangle this way or this way. So 1 divided by 1 is 1, the gradient is 1, and the y-intercept is minus 1. So we can then write the equation of the line, y equals, well, 1x, we can really just write x, minus 1 for the y-intercept. Now the only other way that they try to trick you in modules like this one is they sometimes give you an equation of the line and it's not quite in the form that you were wanting. It's not quite in this form. So let me give you an example. They might give you an equation like this. 2x plus 2y equals, let's say, 3. And they ask you, what is the gradient, what is the y-intercept? And graph this line. Well, what we need to do is turn it into this form. So we need to get y by itself and rearrange it so y is the subject. So begin by getting the 2y on its own, and we can do that by subtracting 2x from each side. So this side will just leave us with the 2y, but if we subtract 2x from both sides, we'll have minus 2x over here with the 3. At this point we're close, we've got 2y and we want y. So if we just halve everything on both sides of the equation, we'll have what we want. We've halved the 2y to get y, we need to halve the 3 to give us 1.5, and we need to halve the minus 2x, that's minus x. Now it's sort of looking like this, but it's not quite familiar. We've got the x's at the end and the numbers at the beginning. So rearrange it, put the x's first. Now remember, this negative is not just floating there, it's part of the x. We have minus 1 x's. And then add the part at the end, the 1.5. Now if we go to graph this, we can easily see now that the gradient is the coefficient of x, it's minus 1. The y-intercept is 1.5. So it cuts through here at 1.5. And the gradient of minus 1 will look like this. It's a negative gradient, so we're going down the hill as we read crossways. And it has 1 rise for every 1 run. So that means if we have a 1.5 here, we'll have 1.5 here as well, won't we? We can sort of build the gradient by building a triangle with the proportions that we want. We want it to be just as tall as it is wide. And now we have our line and everything else flows along.